If Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe can openly, plainly, and boldly violate the Constitution by banning all public speech, banning free speech around a Lee monument in Charlottesville, how likely is it, do you think, that a judge in Sequatchie County, Tennessee, can do the same thing and get away with it? Because, after all, Judge Graham is only a Tennessee jurist at a low-level court, that is to say a trial court, chancery court in Sequatchie County. And the actions of Judge Thomas Graham are strikingly and boldly outside of his authority and an offense against the Constitution, both that of Tennessee and that of the federal union. This is David Tulis, and we're here at Nooga Radio, 1240 AM and 92.7 FM, to consider for just a minute the bold courage, and the stamina of these elected officials who think that the Constitution can be just overridden because of some necessity. Now, in Sequatchie County, the necessity is municipal need, the duty, the claims of municipal government in Dunlap Town to have an inspection of a house that is in perfectly fine condition, but nonetheless an inspection that is a search without a warrant. In Virginia, there is an executive order that's come out by the head of the executive branch of state government, and he says that no demonstrations shall be authorized at the Lee Monument in the absence of a permit issued by the Department of General Services. The term demonstrations includes demonstrations. Well, that's good. Processions, picketing, speech-making, marching, vigils, and all other like forms of conduct that involve the communication or expression of views or grievances engaged in by one or more persons, the conduct of which is reasonably likely to draw a crowd or onlookers. This term includes displays of flags, banners, and other demonstratives designed to communicate a message. Well, this is illegal, okay? It's illegal, and yet it's happening in a great state. That is the state for which General Lee fought his battles against Yankee hordes and whose army killed too few of them in its resistance of the invasion of the South. The order violates the First Amendment, says one constitutional attorney to Breitbart News. The state will say it's content neutral, and some statist judge could uphold it on those grounds. But that's a corrupted interpretation of the First Amendment, which we all know is common. It's a common error to think that, well, if you make it content neutral and you ban all free expression, then everybody's equally offended, and thereby nobody really is offended. Now, in Sequatchie County, closer to home, we have today in the jail a very modern jail for which bond money was issued to the county government in Sequatchie. We have sitting in a cell Carol Gaddy, 69 years old. She is a woman, and I say that because her sex is important, as she thinks it is, because there are men all around her who despise her and who reject her, partly on account of her feminine nature. But she is a woman. She's savvy. She's been in real estate, and for the past 2 years, she has been boning up on American law, resisting and fighting in the courts in that state. The court should be the city court, but the county chancery court has the claim on this case for now. Now, I was just about to say has jurisdiction on this case, but I would refine that to say it has ministerial jurisdiction only. Now, the difference is when a judge such as Judge Thomas Graham has jurisdiction, he has the authority to rule over the facts. He has the authority to absorb all the facts, to bring them before his bar, and then apply the law to them. Now, that's jurisdiction. He has subject matter jurisdiction in addition to having in personam jurisdiction, which is to say authority over the person, right? And generally, if you're in a county and a county judge is ruling on a matter involving your facts, he has in personam jurisdiction. So he has theoretically those two forms of jurisdiction. But Graham has ministerial jurisdiction only. That is to say, he has authority to do only one thing, and that is to dismiss the whole case as being outside of his authority, outside of his jurisdiction. This is a matter I've looked at in some detail, and for God's glory, and hopefully for the edification of the reader of Nooganomics.com, the one reader, the man who matters, who reads Nooganomics.com. There are not many men who matter. I just want you to know that. And you give me a few minutes of your time. You get the short argument here at the David Tulis Show on Nooga Radio live on your smartphone. By the way, just get the TuneIn Radio app and have Nooga Radio as your choice. And every time you tap that icon, up we pop, and you can hear Sean Hannity at 3. We've got Bloomberg News at 2. We have 2 terrific Bloomberg shows, very high-end radio programs. Interview, the first one is about power and politics in Washington and in national government. And the second one is the markets. Yesterday, during the eclipse, I was hearing about international capital flows as I was in Bakewell with my wife, Jeanette, and a son, and meeting some other families, some Christian homeschool and other families. We had found a field in some farmland north of Saudi Daisy, where we live, and spent our time during the eclipse there. And I was as I was starting the van to say farewell as the sunlight reemerged, there was Bloomberg, which we have here on our station exclusively here in this market. David Tulis at Nooga Radio talking about high-end finance and liquid capital flows international. So these are the kind of programs we have, very high-end, and we do appreciate your giving us just a couple of minutes of your time. Now, the question in Dunlap is over authority. The judge does not have authority. He just doesn't. and the case against Mrs. Gaddy, who's in jail, she's probably already had her very meager white bread breakfast, which I'm sure is turning her stomach. She's a very refined, nature-loving, health-oriented person at age 69, very healthy, strong 69-year-old person who fears that she's going to die in that jail. She fears her own death in that jail, partly because she's and that she's going to be there for years, because she believes that with healthy living, healthy eating, and a prayerful Christian life, she's going to have a long life. And she's not going to say yes, okay? She's not going to say yes. She says they'll take her dead body out of Sequatchie County jail. Her son tells me this morning she's not going to give in. And in a way, she is representative of you. Now, Donald Trump is making wild statements this morning, or rather, they're quoted this morning from last night's presentation about the 16-year-long Yankee war in the deserts of Afghanistan, the rugged country of Afghanistan. And his argument is that, well, if a soldier dies, we all die. If a soldier's injured, we're all injured. If an American anywhere is injured by a Muslim, we're all injured by this Muslim. And I can borrow from him, if I might, to say that this courageous woman in the jail in Sequatchie County represents you, right? And so if there's an injury to any person by a law violator, and not a private law violator I'm talking about here, but a state actor who's violating the law, then we are all damaged by it. And so Mrs. Gaddy, just as Hanson Melvin did, has a representative nature. And of course, in this is important to understand, because Christianity teaches the idea of representation. The fact that because Christ represents his people before God, right? He takes their sin upon himself unto his own death on the cross, and then represents to God the Father, who will accept no sin at all. He represents that sinner with his own body. He's, I have died for that person, David Tulis, and accept him on account of accepting me. Right? That's what the Son says to the Father in that Trinitarian relationship in the Godhead. He represents me to God the Father. And so in the next world, when I pass from this mortal flesh into heaven, to have my sins accounted for and my good works accounted for as well, because they were done in the Lord Jesus' name, then that is by representation that I'm saved, right? I'm saved in eternity. So representation is a Christian concept, and it is the basis of Western civilization. It is the basis, as they say, of democracy. But we could say, at any rate, democratic government, right? Democratically elected government, representational government, that comes from Christianity. And Mrs. Gaddy represents you. Now, the question is about the authority of the town and the mayor. These are often, I think, these policies come from individuals. They are individual actions dressed up as policy with a kind of gloss that Steve Greer, the city attorney, makes look legal. Right? He makes it look legal. And though I've not seen the latest iterations of pen to paper in his case, I hope to very soon. We can see we can say the following: that we have an abuse of the law against the private person. You're much more likely to be damaged by a state crime than a private crime. We've had crime going down in the United States for decades, for decades. And the danger to you most likely is from a state actor, often wearing uniform. That I would say that. And in fact, most people have their encounter with the state in its most unpleasant form on the highway and in traveling. And that is because the officer stops them as though they are operating in commerce and involved in transportation. So there is the abuse of deception for one, and the abuse of harassment for two. And the victim is the citizen who has to go to court, right? Has to go to court, or just pay the fine and pay the bribe, the state bribe, to make it go away. And you're much more likely to be shot. You're about 10 times more likely to be shot by an officer than you are to be shot by a foreign-born terrorist on domestic soil. You're just not likely to be killed by a terrorist. Even the most devout, fanatical Muslim who would take as many people like you with him as he could, your danger from him is 10 times less than that of the officer. So we have in our day a kind of state Sharia, which is demanding and enforcing, and there are bills in Congress that are going to criminalize having cash. These are continuing grievances that we have against the Congress. Even against our own state representative, our own federal representative, though he may vote against it, the fact that he's there, he represents it to us, and that is why Fleischman and Corker and Alexander should always be viewed with suspicion, because they are representing the national government to us. We think they represent us to it, but no, they represent it to us, and we're often confused on minor points like that. That's why, that's because we're easily confused. That's why the Lord Jesus gave parables of very simple stories that make a single point. The parable of the sower makes a single point. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, a single point. The parable of the wicked servant who would not forgive the petty debt owed to him, a simple and single point. In the Gaddy story, we have this question: does municipal necessity trump constitutionally guaranteed God-given rights? That's the question. And Mrs. Gaddy says no. She says no, and she's right. She is correct, though she is being abused on our account. She's being abused on your account. Now, I've made some efforts to speak with attorneys who might be sympathetic to her and take an interest. I said, well, these are people who don't have money, and this would be a pro bono situation for you, where you can provide that service without expecting compensation or much compensation. Your normal billing routines will not be respected, very likely in the Gaddy case. But could you help? I haven't found anybody to offer assistance to this couple, Thomas and Carol Gaddy. She arrested Friday or Thursday last. No, I'm sorry, Monday last or Tuesday last. And the husband, having gotten away in a court, they both made an appearance in Hamilton County Court. In great danger to themselves. They probably should not have done that. And she did not escape notice of the deputy, and was taken to the jail, and then to Silverdale, and then of past couple days to the Sequatchie County Jail, where she is. Does the city of Dunlap have the authority to search her house without a warrant? The answer is no. And I was talking with I have some very unusual acquaintances. For example, one of my counselors is a carpenter, and another counselor, person with whom we discuss legal questions, is a laborer. And these are Tennessee people. One is called the Gnome of Strawberry Plains in my in my phone. That's how I put him. And the other one sent me a case last night. He said, and I did find reference to it this morning in American jurisprudence as I was looking up searches and seizures. But it's Camara versus Municipal Court of the City and County of San Francisco. It's a 1967 case that says, is there a necessity, a municipal necessity so great as to override the Fourth Amendment? And the answer is no. There is no need, even for public health, safety, and welfare. Those requirements that may impinge on the schedule of an inspector, they are not great enough to override a no by the property owner of a piece of private property, right? In this case, it's a renter in issue. And in the Dunlap case, it's not a renter. These are owners of the property, a 1 acre lot on Main Street. It's a pistol shot, a carbine shot, I guess I should say, from City Hall in a bend in Coops Creek. And Mrs. Gaddy says that the city doesn't even have, that she's not even in the city. And that's another question that is pending, and that is that the city of Dunlap has to show under a new statute that State Senator Frank Nicely got introduced and passed. The city has to show when challenged that it has jurisdiction and that this house is in fact in the city limits, which I think may be certainly may be a point of contention, if not outright skepticism. So in this story in Camara, an inspector returned without a warrant 2 or 3 times, and the appellant, the man who's appealing at that is Camara, said no. And so finally they said he's required by law to permit an inspection under the housing code. And again, it's a municipal housing code. And the appellant said, no, I'm not letting you. You have to get a warrant. And so he was charged criminally with refusing to permit a lawful inspection in violation of that code in San Francisco. And he was arrested. He was released on bail. And he filed a petition for writ of prohibition. Someone evidently who knew his rights, because that's not something that an attorney likely would propose. But we have a right to privacy. We have a right to be secure against arbitrary invasions by government officials. And that's what Mayor Dwayne Land wants to do in Dunlap. It is an arbitrary invasion of property without consent. And we have the Fourth Amendment. Why? Well, it is protection of the rights of a free people and is basic to a free society, that you can say no, and that no has to be respected apart from a warrant. If there's no warrant, it's unreasonable and it shall not be allowed. The right of officers to thrust themselves into a home is also a grave concern. It says in Johnson versus U.S., not only to the individual, but to a society which chooses to dwell in reasonable security and freedom from surveillance. When the right of privacy must reasonably yield to the right to search, I should say, to the authority to search, is as a rule to be decided by a judicial officer, not by a policeman or a government enforcement agent. And that's what Mayor Dwayne Land doesn't recognize. He says he thinks that no, my need to inspect this house to make sure that the people who are neighbors aren't in danger. That's his pretended claim. The neighbors are in danger. This house may fall down. It may fall down on the occupants and on the neighbors. He said that without any authority. He just made it up in that first complaint, the 2.5-page complaint, in which alleges nothing of any criminal nature by the Gaddys. Nothing is even alleged to be criminal, and yet he wants to have what he calls an inspection, but it is in fact a search. And the parties there, Judge Graham and the city attorney, Stephen Greer, who ought to know better, and Mayor Dwayne Land, they are a trio. They are a triumvirate, and they believe they can push and push and push. And apparently, Kelly says that the order of incarceration is permanent. Again, where's the means of appeal? Was she treated properly in being allowed to have a hearing before a magistrate to set the bond, right? To set the bond and to verify that these are in fact lawful and legitimate claims against her, which they're not. Here's the problem, and you're going to have to enjoy some important messages here in just a minute, so I can't finish. But the problem is, if there is no penalty in the ordinance, how can there be a penalty for refusal, right? She's refusing in the ordinance in Dunlap. There's no penalty for refusal. There may be inspections, but there's no penalty for not allowing it. And in the Camara case, there was a criminal penalty attached for not allowing it. And that was that whole regime was overturned. Well, this is David Tulis, and we are grieved that there is near Chattanooga, in our listening area, an arbitrary, capricious series of actions by judge and mayor against this feisty Southern woman. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 12.